Welcome to MHN Voices, our series through which we present insightful discussions among industry thought leaders, moderated by our editorial team. Today, I'll be talking with a group of multifamily executives who have already made a mark on the industry and are sure to have even greater influence as they continue to rise. They'll provide insights into how they rose so quickly, how they're working to shape their teams, and the skills they see as necessary to move the industry forward. I'm Suzanne Silverman, Editorial Director of Multi-Housing News, and joining me today are David Rodriguez, Vice President at MLG Capital, Joey Verant, COO at Cushman & Wakefield, Karen Whipper, Executive Vice President and Chief Underwriter at Dwight Capital, and Sarah Young, CFO at Bell Partners. We're recording this session, and it'll be available for later viewing. In addition, we're going to leave some time at the end to answer your questions, so please submit them at any time during the webinar. Don't be shy. And thank you to those of you who submitted some in advance. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Let's start out with a little bit of background on everybody to provide some context for our discussion. Karen, why don't you start us out telling us how you got into real estate and what attracted you to the field?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne, so much for having me. Uh, so my real estate career path, I graduated college during the Great Recession in '09, and I, like many of my fellow graduates at the time, went on to grad school. I went on to do a JD MBA joint program, and even though I knew I didn't want to be an attorney, I actually started in the real estate field as an intern my after my second year of that 4-year grad program, and sort of just lucked into it. Happened to know from the internship, my legal internship, happened to know the head of marketing at a what happened to be a multifamily lender, and started there during grad school and essentially never left. Loved it, loved working with real estate, financing apartments. Um, I think part of what is so wonderful about real estate is a tangible product in the finance world when a lot of things aren't. And it's nice to work with the borrowers and to deliver housing units for um, people. And so eventually just worked my way up within that company, which was acquired by the company I currently work for. And I now serve as, you said, the chief underwriter, work specifically in financing apartments in the HUD insured financing space. So that was my journey.
Okay, thank you. David, could you give us your background?
Yeah, happy to. Did a brief stint of college baseball, but ultimately attended SMU in Dallas, which has obviously deep ties to commercial real estate, and really started studying general business, but was fortunate enough to meet a lot of SMU alum at a golf course that I was working at the time. A lot of whom were in commercial real estate, and so that really piqued my interest and kind of had me looking at what that career looks like. And I got a lot of people I could bounce ideas off of. And so, I fell in love with it and ended up graduating with a degree in real estate finance from SMU. Got lucky and joined a rapidly growing entrepreneurial company, MLG Capital, which I'm currently at. Right out of college, and they allowed me to wear a lot of hats, but primarily I was focused at the beginning and underwriting and deal execution across the Sun Belt, and through various roles I've had within the company, but ultimately leading me to where I am today, which I oversee our acquisitions platform across the Southeast. And I'm now based in our Florida office.
Okay, thank you. And Joey?
Yep. Hey, everybody. So my background is, or entry point into the industry is a little bit different. I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school and deployed to Iraq in 2008. And my story is really that of just I've had good mentors and I've benefited immensely from those mentors. And so a guy that I deployed with in 2008 was a finance investment type. And I was 18 at the time, not really sure what I wanted to do after I graduated. The idea, I joined as a reservist, so the idea was always to finish and then enter the workforce. But he got me interested in investing. So my story was kind of when we had free time overseas, I was reading about investing and finance and came back, transferred to Iowa State University. Go Cyclones! We're looking good. I'm excited for the weekend. And that experience kind of led me down the finance route. That led to an internship with Principal Real Estate Investors out of Des Moines. So I was there full time 9 months. When that program was completed, I went back, graduated, wanted to get the hell out of Iowa. So I moved to Chicago, took my first job, and then again benefited from mentors. And I've just where there was a need, I kind of position myself as a guy that can get the job done and can be very aggressive and aggressively productive, I would say. And, over the last 15 years since that point, most of my career has been on the ownership asset management side, brief stint on the property management side, but mostly as an owner. And then 2 months ago, almost to the day, I joined Cushman as the chief operating officer on the multifamily asset services team. So that's my story.
Okay, a little bit different there. And Sarah, I know you have a still different story, so please fill us in.
Great. Thank you for having me on. So I did my undergraduate and graduate degree at UNC, and I did my master's of accounting there immediately following graduating, and joined Ernst& Young in Charlotte out of college. And I spent 3 years there and really enjoyed it. Great fundamental backgrounds, understanding kind of business and the day-to-day operations of kind of many different organizations, but ultimately, pretty early on, knew that that wasn't a lifelong path for me. And I spent a lot of time in Chicago on a client and was introduced to Walton Street Capital, and just was really fascinated by the business. So they're a fund manager that invests in many different types of real estate across the spectrum. And I was pretty committed to getting a job at that company. So I interviewed multiple times and for every role that was open over the course of 6 to 8 months, and finally landed the gig and moved to Chicago, and joined Walton Street. And that was a really transformational time in my life and career trajectory. It was incredibly interesting, a very fast-paced organization. I learned a ton. I would say they had very much so a kind of a sink or swim mentality, and it was a great place to kind of differentiate yourself and rise to the top. I moved up quickly in the organization, and that's what really kind of led to my current path. I left Walton Street to move back to North Carolina and joined Lennar Multifamily Communities after 5 years with Walton Street. And they were launching their first institutional fund after being just a merchant builder and developer for the first kind of 5 years of their life cycle. So great opportunity to come in and help build out their entire institutional platform. And I spent 10 years with LMC, Lennar, Cortera. They had several different names while I was with them. And moved throughout the organization into kind of several different roles. So I started in their fund management team and led their back office accounting and finance team. And I moved over to the investment side and was a managing director of investments for a while, and then ultimately stepped into the CFO role. And the last 5 years that I was at Cortera, we went through kind of several iterations of the business and spent a long time trying to spin the company off publicly, and then reposition the business and sold off several parts, including the operating platform, and broke off the construction side of the business and repositioned it for kind of a really, I think, exciting opportunity in the future to be a much more streamlined developer. But ultimately, I really enjoyed the vertically integrated part of the business that we had built at Cortera and LMC, and missed the property management side of the world and kind of having all of the different stacks within the multifamily space. And an opportunity came along at Bell Partners last year when their CFO of almost 20 years retired. And so I took the opportunity to interview there and have joined Bell Partners, and I'm really excited to be there.
Fascinating. And um, I, I thought it was really interesting how you persevered to switch into real estate at that company. You said you kept trying for 6 to 8 months and it finally happens. So I think that's a good lesson that, it may, the transition can take time, but it can happen. And I'd love to hear more about that. Um, what do you find
Sure.
different about the trajectory in real estate versus in your accounting career, and what adjustments did you need to make that transition?
Yeah, a great question. The type of accounting I was in, auditing and part of a public accounting firm, everything is backward looking, right? So I am basically double checking other people's work, reporting the news versus kind of setting the stage for what's coming in the future. So that was the biggest transition for me was, part of the reason I wanted to leave, but also, a big adjustment to how you perceive the business. In accounting and kind of a traditional sense, you're never part of the kind of making the decisions for the future. You're always just kind of reporting what has happened. And certainly super important, and that information should be leveraged for how you operate the business, but you're not necessarily in the seat to make those decisions. So kind of transitioning over into the real estate space and then more specifically into the CFO seat that I'm in now, I would say that, really the biggest difference is just having the opportunity to be in the seat to influence outcomes in the future. So absolutely everyone should be leveraging the reporting that comes out and the information based on past performance, but having a seat at the table and, executing, being a part of the investment committee and making decisions on where capital should go and kind of the strategy of the business is the biggest transition for me from kind of where I was headed on a kind of strictly audit path in my original part of my career to where I am today.
And I guess being aware of those differences makes
Absolutely,
you that
yeah.
much more conscious of what you're drawing from, as well as the changes that you're looking to make.
Absolutely, yeah. I can't speak highly enough of my early days. I think those fundamentals and kind of learning how a business operates, what the financial statements represent were incredibly meaningful. And I think people that are lacking that depth of understanding of the financials and what drives a business forward from an operating perspective is incredibly important, but being able to leverage that information to make decisions is ultimately where I wanted to be. And so I think it was a great kind of pivot and but also a great first step in the career.
Hmm. David, thinking back to the early days of your career, because I'd like to go with that trajectory for a bit, just to get some thoughts out on those uh, aspects before we move forward to your experiences today as a manager. So, David, when you were a newcomer in the industry, what did you do to gain credibility with older or more experienced colleagues and clients? What really got you moving forward so quickly?
Yeah, good question. Definitely had to get comfortable with being the youngest in a lot of rooms. But I think ultimately it comes down to, being prepared, being a professional, and maybe like most importantly, being humble. I think you should be spending a lot of time listening to people that have more experience and probably less time talking. Uh, I think, there's a lot of things that in your career you don't know, and you have to be willing to admit that and absorb that knowledge and information from others that have had that experience. And so I think a lot of people, in the industry that I've met, they respond really well to an eagerness to learn, and that kind of genuine, interest in real estate and this industry. So I think as long as you approach it that way, you're going to get, a lot of people that believe in you and, respect your work ethic and ultimately, support you in your career.
And Joey, what contributed most to your advancement over the years? And what's
Just
your
I've
strategy been for that?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but I've just
Hmm.
benefited immensely by having good mentors. So when I
Hmm.
think about where I'm at now, there's typically, there's a handful of people that either I've worked with or worked for. Those people move on, and if you do good work for people and you are aggressive in your pursuit of knowledge, David, you touched on that a little bit. Like if you're eager to learn, that's a differentiator. Um, I think I've done two things well. I've been very aggressive to a fault at times, and so there's a downside to that bias for action, if you will. But that has always been kind of my North Star, like be the one that's productive. And the reality is, if you do that, people notice that. Not everybody will love that approach. There are trade-offs for sure. But in my career, um, right out of school when I graduated, that stuck with me. And really, my first pivot from my first job out of school, I wasn't there long. Um, but what ended up happening was a guy that I worked for and with said, this is where dreams go to die. You got to get out of here, man, basically. And so he connected me with somebody that is still a mentor of mine to this day. And that individual, found me a home. I was there for about 4 years. That individual connected me with another individual who that person is also a mentor to me today. And that's kind of the path I've taken up until this latest move to Cushman, which is a little bit different. But I think if you have a bias for action, you move aggressively towards a goal, and you come across as productive, eager to listen, but eager to learn and be self-motivated. I think that line of thinking is kind of what has led me to elevate like I have.
Sounds like you've really stayed in touch or kept working with your
Mhm.
mentors on an
For
ongoing
sure,
basis.
for sure.
Did
And
you?
even on a
Mhm.
personal level, personal and professional. And what's interesting about real estate is, Karen, you touched on the tangible nature of the asset class, which is great. But there is it's not just a technical. There are technical elements to the industry for sure, but it's a mix of kind of technical analytics, economics play a huge role. Um, but it's a people business as well. And so yeah, Suzanne, I would say there are people today early on in my career, a couple of which that I mentioned, which at my last company they invested with me, right? So it comes
Mhm.
full circle, full circle. I've owned, a couple of smaller properties on the side, kind of as a hobby in a past life, and one of those mentors was my lender on that deal. So you really never know in what areas you are able to help people or they're able to help you. And I think continuing to invest in those relationships and stick with people. People move around, right? Like you might have a mentor or somebody that you connect with in the industry now. Well, a year from now, they might elevate. They might need there might be a role for you there. And so I think maintaining that connection is critical. And because of that, because I feel so strongly, I mean, I keep using the word mentor and mentorship. I'm like a broken record, but to me, it is a priority to now turn around and mentor those that are coming up in the industry, and I make that a big priority as well.
So did you consciously make them mentors? It sounds the first one you mentioned was introduced to you, so it's not like doesn't sound like you went out purposely found that person, but were you consciously making them mentors? Did you ask them to be mentors, or did it just happen
Just
kind of
happened
naturally,
organically. Yeah, I think
organically?
naturally. It's yeah, I've never said, oh, I need guidance, I need a mentor. But now looking back even 5 years into my career, a decade or so ago, um, you zoom out, I'm like, okay, that is a mentor. I can go to them for personal or professional reasons. And
Hmm.
so that it's kind of evolved naturally. But yeah, I mean, personally, professionally, kind of side hustle as I touched on previously. People are around, and if they know that you're trustworthy and you work hard and you're credible and you're truthful, there's a lot of benefits that are hard to foresee in this moment, but they will pay dividends moving forward.
About anybody else? Have you all had mentors?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I think that's uh, and like Joey said, it wasn't as if I sought out a mentor. A lot of times, I mean, I think there's a lot of luck involved in the people you cross paths with. There's also part of it that is the what you bring to the table, as a as Joey said, I think consistently delivering a reliable, useful product in whatever task you're given, or go out and ask, hey, can I help? Is there anything I can do? And if you can do that and be useful and add value, you're going to be continued to do things. You're going to be continued to be given opportunities, and those people will naturally, serve as your mentors and helping you
Mhm.
to do that. So yeah, just my bosses have been my mentors. Anyone that, worked longer than me. I mean, I think you can learn from anyone. You can even learn from people that you manage. So I think just by being able to deliver something, be capable, be driven, and just be reliable in producing good work product for people and be helpful, you'll naturally attract people who want to help you and foster your career. And that
Mhm.
was my experience, and it was, I think, part of the reason I was able to climb up, and am where I am today.
Did anybody look for a mentor that was different than what's been traditionally recommended or even what was recommended to you? Did you go after a specific goal in seeking out anybody for guidance? David or Sarah, any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't say that I've had like one mentor that, I've been seeking information for in a traditional sense, but I would say like I've just had a lot of individuals over the years that, I look to for guidance. I find, the characteristics that I'm, looking for or the commonalities I would say in people that I would consider mentors would be like people that have a very strong moral compass and integrity. And I think those couple of characteristics are unbelievably helpful in commercial real estate.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it's a very relationship driven industry, like Joey was talking about earlier.
Mhm.
The connections that you can make in this business are frankly unlike anything I've seen, from personally and professional standpoint. So, your reputation means a lot to your success and those relationships in concert with that. So, I would say people who lean into that same thought process make excellent mentors.
I guess I would just add that I'm probably on the opposite end of the spectrum of where Joey was from a mentorship perspective. Regretfully, likely so. And early in my career, I did not spend a lot of time really cultivating those intentional relationships with mentors, and spent the bulk of my time really just kind of, not to say that you weren't, because I heard you say that you were, Joey, but like head down, doing the work, grinding, expecting my performance to speak for itself rather than spending the time and investing in groups like, all of the professional networking groups, really growing my network. And so I've had to play catch up for the last, 5 to 10 years to try and be more intentional to get into those spaces. And it's really difficult to do later in your career. So I would just kind of caution that, it may feel like you're doing all you need to do by getting your job done, but playing catch up later can be difficult. So.
Has that colored how you approach mentoring, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm fortunate that I worked for great people. So I think Karen may have mentioned sometimes it's luck who your mentors are.
Yeah.
So I have great mentors just from a default of, having happened to have worked for really amazing people that are still there for me today. Kind of in these more, strategic thinking when I make large career jumps, or if I have a question about kind of the market in general, people that I have relationships with. But, I try to lead in a way that makes sure that I am hopefully a mentor to my people. I think sometimes you learn just as much from poor leaders on how you don't want to be a
Mhm.
leader as you do from great leaders. Hopefully I'm on, one end of that spectrum and not the other. But
Mhm.
absolutely. And, my approach to mentoring is and has always been to truly elevate people. So I benefited from that in my career, letting people kind of put me first and foremost, kind of give me the stage before I was necessarily ready. So I try and do the same for my people. I'd say I'm kind of the opposite of a micromanager, and my philosophy is really kind of that sink or swim. That's what let me, opened up so many doors for me in my time at Walton Street. And so I think that's a really kind of incredible way to give people opportunity, is to give them a task and not hold their hand all the way through it. Certainly be there for any questions to help set the stage, can give them the tools they need to get it done, but allowing people to really kind of learn and grow and challenge, I think it's really important. And once they do that, then they've earned the right to be in the room, right? I don't take credit for other people's work. I expect you to do the work, and then I want you to get the credit for it as well. So I think, challenging people, but then also giving the benefit of that satisfaction of getting the stage when they put the effort in, I think is really important. And that's kind of the cornerstone to what I think my mentorship is like.
I
I,
agree with everything you just said. Like I would
yep.
word for word, basically. Yeah. I mean, I think my approach to mentees and those that I work with, even if it's not a direct mentee mentor relationship, is I'll give you as much rope as you want. The benefit goes to you, but the repercussions do as well. But like, bite off more than you can chew, and you'll sink or swim, as you said. So I'm completely aligned with you there.
Yeah, I also agree with everything everyone's saying. Yeah, micromanaging is not my style either. It's a lot of work to micromanage, and I don't have time to do that. I'm not interested, and so um, and I think we're all in a professional career. Commercial real estate is not. You've got to be able to stand on your own two legs if you're going to be successful. So. And the people that are most successful are the ones that need the least micromanaging, but will still come to you when they need something. So it's not about, you know, that they understand that how to further, something, but don't need their hand held at every step, are willing to try and figure it out, learn, know where to look for answers. You may not memorize or know the answer. I certainly, things go in and out of my head. I can't keep it all in there from deal to deal. Um, but I know when I've had a deal experience, I know where to look when I need to find something, or I'll go find the answer. I know someone who might have done a similar transaction. And I think all of those things, um, again, enable me to provide a consistent, you know, good product. And that's what people can rely on you, and they can trust you. And that means a lot.
Let's talk about how much things may or may not have changed in the industry, and how that's impacted what you look for. Um, and Karen, I'll stay with you for the moment, although please anybody else join in. What skills did you find necessary for career advancement, and do you see them as the same ones today, or do you see any as having changed?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about. So, um, yeah, I think the skills that we've mentioned are ones that everyone's mentioned that I've sort of alluded to, taking initiative, self-starting, being eager to learn, um, and being able to make good decisions, which involves some critical thinking,
Hmm.
um, and building relationships. I think they're the same that are useful today. Well, the technology changes, or the product might change a little bit, or your role might change. All of those are going to be tools for success for people who um, work in the real estate industry, probably work in any job, frankly. But yeah, I would say they're similar. I do, sort of see with the rise of technology and um, AI, and just how sort of two things. One is, how important critical thinking is.
Hmm.
And I think that gets lost today sometimes, problem solving, ability to really sort of think through an issue versus just, I need to write up this one pager, and it's not just like check the box, that is not what adds value. Um, and the other thing is the relationships. I think people are much more apt to text instead of call, want to chat or email, and it is hard to build a relationship Those are important tools, of course, and I use them more now than I used to, but I will say that I think those are things that have always been important and will continue to remain important, but may be sort of getting lost in being developed.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think, the technical skills of most, people young in their career are off the charts, and frankly, you start to lose some of that as you get throughout your career. And there's a lot of people that can pick up your slack, right? But the soft skills I think are super valuable. Being able to pick up the phone, call somebody, work through a problem, because we all know there are a bunch of problems. So those skills are invaluable.
And I think that's a good point with the rise of AI, and it offers so many values, and we continue to find more, but you have to be careful not to lose the things that humans still provide value for, like that critical thinking. Um, Sarah, any new
Yeah,
skills
I
that
think
you've seen?
AI is such a hot topic.
Hmm.
And I think it would be difficult to talk about skills that are necessary today without touching on that one, since it is that kind of the tip of every conversation. I kind of take a different approach to it though. I think it's almost it's necessitated the ability to be a better communicator. Right now, we have all of the information at our fingertips. Data for the sake of data is often what I see happening is, you can get any information you want now, but what information do you need and how do we communicate that back? So, it's almost a harm to some communication and kind of strategy and where are we going, that this kind of constant need for more and more and more information I think has really heightened the ability or the necessity from a skills perspective to be able to distill information and communicate it clearly. Make sure you're staying on task and not get lost in the data. So data fluency is really important, making sure you understand the data, not just aggregating data and delivering data. So I think that will be kind of a real differentiator here as AI kind of steps up and it's not just can you find the information, can you deliver it? Because anyone can do that now with AI tools. It's do you understand it? Can you communicate it? And are you really delivering what the intended ask is?
Um, and I guess staying on the subject of AI, um, let's talk about implementing those technologies into your team and winning buy-in from maybe more reluctant people or even not. You may not have anybody who's reluctant, but they're just not sure what to do with it. How, when you're working with your teams, are you um, encouraging that sort of, I guess, explore? I guess it's really explorative thinking. Um, and Karen, I don't know if you've got any
Yeah,
particular thoughts on that.
sure. Yeah, I would say on the buy-in side, I think the main resistance that I see is people afraid it's going to take their job. And
Hmm.
so they just are resistant to the idea of it at all and like are threatened. And so I try to encourage the thinking, and it doesn't replace a human. I don't think,
Hmm.
at least in our real estate job, if you guys have all said it's relationship based, problem solving, those are things AI is not gonna help, at least at this point. I don't know if AI at some point is gonna be able to become a human but at this point, I just its main tool for me is to make things more efficient. So when we have to prepare repetitive things, put rent rolls that are PDF in a form of an Excel, instead of having to enter that data, and I guess, Adobe does it, but similar things where we can distill, take this whatever and make it in this format. Summarize this thing and use it as a starting point. I think it helps with efficiency, um, distilling down some information if you can put large, amounts of information into it. But it's not going to replace the human on the buy-in side. And then on the flip side of sort of, I would say on the other end, I would say some of, and I tend to see this in our younger hires, are perhaps even using it too much, um, relying on it again to do some of that thinking for them. And that I can see is not producing the best product, and having to coach them on what it is good for, what it does and doesn't replace. And you can have AI generate something, but I find with almost everything it generates, I've got to go through and refine it if it's a
Mhm.
sort of an email or a summary or something. And just the importance of not taking it at face value and really, again, sort of thinking about, is this the way we want to do it? Does this make sense? And changing where it doesn't. So again, that ability to sort of make the decisions and critically think.
Does it
Um,
even make sense for our particular company?
right. And privacy is, of course, a concern. And
Hmm.
um, but I do think it does help make some things efficient. Like it helps do things. Just like Excel sort of replaced the calculator,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
yeah,
it's not that it will take your job, it's that the job will change and you'll be able to do things differently or get through information differently.
yeah,
So we're trying to use it for good, and for the things it's good for, and not rely on it for the things it's not.
yeah. Sorry, I was thinking about does the particular conclusion it came to make sense for your specific company? And that's sort of where you're thinking through critically. Not only how much do you know about the industry, but kind of those refinements. I can see that really requiring that critical thinking. Before we go on, I just want to remind everybody in the audience that we will be happy to answer your questions shortly. So if you do have any, please do put them in that Q&A uh, section so that we can put them before our panel today. Um, and in the meantime, let's talk some more about the thought process that goes into the what you do to put together a successful team. Um, Joey, we talked some about mentoring, but maybe you could talk some more about your strategy for encouraging growth of individuals on your team.
Yeah. I mean, I touched on it a little bit by the commentary that Sarah had, and I think Karen echoed as well. Just, if you work for me, I'll give you as much rope as
Hmm.
you want to achieve what we need to achieve. I think another part is there's a hate to sound like everything I say is about the military or Marine Corps, but like there are some lessons that even decades later are I think about daily. One of those is a principle of commander's intent. And so the idea is as a leader, you are strategical, or you're strategic. That was a George Bushism there, strategical, but you are a strategic leader and thinker, not a tactical, right? So tactical would be kind of on the ground, strategic would be elevated. And the idea as a leader, regardless of what your level is, I think to tell your team what you're trying to achieve. And if you have the right people under you, they will figure out how best to do that based on the resources and bandwidth that they have. So when I think about team building and like what I'm looking for and how I operate, here's a deficiency I see, or here's what we need to achieve. I'm here to support you. Like, but I'm going to give you I'm going to give you the support you need, but I'm going to give you a long enough leash to figure out how best to execute that. Because as you climb the ranks, you're not able to be intimately involved with everything that needs to get accomplished. It needs to be accomplished. You need to convey what needs to be accomplished, but again, empower your team to figure out how to get there. I feel pretty strongly about that principle. Um, that is one. Another one I would say is who you hire and how you coach them is important. And to me, what I look for are not technical skills. I think you can all there's a variety of kind of cliched terms about hiring, the attributes of like the personal characteristics, not the technical skills. You can teach the technical skills. I mean, I'm kind of the believer. Um, that everything is more or less on the job. So I don't really, credentialing matters. I'm not going to say that it doesn't. I mean, that all else equal on a piece of paper, you'd rather have more credentials than fewer. But to me, I've never looked for that. I look for, when I sit across from you, do I see hunger? Do I see aggression? Are you willing to run through the wall to achieve whatever the mission, or whatever we need to achieve? And that, when you think about like the makeup of your team, I've always preferred to go that direction. So I think if you hire the right people and if you inherit a team that isn't moving in that direction, then that's a coaching opportunity, right? I mean, it's, hey,
Hmm.
new leadership, new set of eyes. Here are my expectations. Here's what that means for you. I'd like you to move in this direction. You need to be a little bit quicker. You need to be a little bit more extreme in how we prioritize and execute a given task. But those are kind of how I think about that. Another thing would be, I started using this phrase internally recently, is radical prioritization. So, when I joined Cushman, there are 500 things that I want to get done tomorrow. Well, the problem is if I try to get 500 things done, I'm not going to get anything done. And so to me, it's a product of, okay, I'm going to connect with my team. Where do they see the biggest need for our attention and man hours? And then, whittle that list down to the top two or three things. So let's very aggressively move in that direction. Let's execute those. Then let's work down the list. So I think, imbuing the team with that mindset, helping them prioritize, giving them the keys to the kingdom and how it gets done, I think is very important. That's how I approach that.
David, what do you see as the most effective methods of building successful teams?
Sure. I would say you have to implement a shared vision. If everybody's running different directions, that won't work. So I would say the more that you can implement a shared vision and bring out the complementary skill sets of the team, I think the more that you can head in the right direction. I mean, I love people that are used to working on team, whether it be through the military or sports or what have you. People that are used to that concept of, okay, this person's better at this than I am, but I'm really good at this. That type of uh, skill set and thought process, I think, is super beneficial towards meeting the end goal. And then, yeah, I would say that you need a lot of buy-in. There are a lot of different parties involved in any type of real estate transaction, and so you're going to need to get everybody on the same page. And frankly, herding cats is one of the best skills that you can have in commercial real estate. So certainly those skills and that those processes matter.
Okay, thanks. Sarah, do you find any value in particular combinations of experience, mixing experience levels, backgrounds, anything like that that you focus on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Never more relevant than when I joined Bell this past year. The the tenure of that company is pretty impressive. They're a 50-year-old business. We are a 50-year-old company. But the depth of tenure within the organization is pretty shocking. So last week we celebrated two of the finance associates' 25th anniversary. So having that depth of tenure was, obviously really compelling when coming to a company because people must love it here. They don't leave. It's also a little nerve-wracking coming in to, what will the practices be like internally if these people have been in the same seat for 25 years? And that speaks to the executive committee as well. Most of the EC has been within Bell for 15 plus years. So I had some concerns, but they have a great reputation. And, I will say I have been wildly impressed at how the tenured associates within the organization really do embrace kind of the new talent, myself included, and across the organization throughout kind of the perspectives, the fresh perspective, and do a great job of balancing. Well, this is the way we've done it for these reasons, right? This is the complications within the structures within our funds. These are the nuances, and being open to kind of reevaluating processes We've done a great job in the last 5 years within the finance organization of taking things out of Excel, taking things out of workbooks, really adapting to new tools and processes to streamline, outsourcing things. I know outsourcing can sound really scary, but just to do that in a way that we could scale more efficiently and take work off of our lower level associates, kind of at the bottom, who are doing the not enjoyable work, so that we can take things off their plate to really give them the opportunity to do true analysis and add value to the business versus kind of the grunt work that you think about at those lower levels. So they've been incredibly receptive to kind of pointing out. I think the tenure, the depth of knowledge within an organization can always help you see like what are the pitfalls of making a change. But you need that fresh perspective in order to come in and really challenge the assumptions. And I think we do. I've been really impressed and pleasantly surprised at the ability of a company with such depth of expertise to really embrace those new kind of thought leaders that come into the organization. And I think that's something that every company needs to really challenge themselves to do, right? If you can't hold on to your talent, I think that speaks to you as an organization and there's a problem. So depth of tenure is a positive to your organization, but you need to be able to balance that with constantly bringing in new talent to keep things fresh, to keep things kind of up to date and make sure that you're not lost in kind of an antiquated path.
Anybody else have any thoughts on that topic? Otherwise, I'd like to spend the remaining time we have talking a little bit about your outlook. And in fact, we do have some questions from the audience that relate to that. So why don't I open this up with some questions from the audience, and I'll add mine in as well, depending on how much time we have. And if anybody else has questions in the audience, please do send them in. But one question I'd like to ask you that was sent to us is, what are the biggest challenges you see in the industry ahead of you as the next generation of leadership? Um, how do you, part of it, and we've discussed some of this already, was how do you see AI impacting the talent pool going forward? But that is an interesting question, um, as some of the more basic tasks are taken over by AI and maybe aren't entry points anymore. So I, I guess that was a multi-layered question there. We can take those two parts separately or together.
Well, I mean, I would say I could talk about AI for the rest of the day, and give some feedback that a lot of people would probably disagree with. But to me, I think that is when I think about the biggest challenges facing multifamily in particular, insurance obviously comes to mind. That is critical if you're an owner and you've gone through renewal, even if you haven't sustained catastrophic losses, that is a problem. That is one where that is very much top of mind. Depending on the market, property taxes are obviously another one. You know, property tax volatility. If you're in a state or municipality that's not capped, that is a problem. But I think when I think about like what is maybe more systemic throughout the industry, I think what is challenging is figuring out where there's a there on the technology side and where you are wasting your time chasing every new shiny product that has AI in its name. And I think figuring out, what is actually helping you get back to basics and execute consistently at scale, the way you want to execute, and where there are technological tools, those should be evaluated and implemented. But I would tell you, we look at a lot and we pilot a lot, and there's a lot of, there are many nascent products that arise that purport to address some issue. But when you really go down the path of info security, integrations with key property management software, training required so that it's implemented properly, and getting our site teams and our regional leadership to implement it consistently, all of those become challenging. So to me, I am oftentimes find myself like the meme of the guy holding his girlfriend's hand walking down the street, and another girl walks by and he turns around. If you probably some of you know the meme I'm talking about. I find myself falling into that trap with technology where I get blown up via email or call or LinkedIn about some new product. I'm like, wow, that sounds great. then I take a step back and say, okay, is that actually improving our site team's ability to execute at a high level consistently, regardless of market? And do we already have a solution for that? And oftentimes, it's kind of the juice is not worth the squeeze there. So the industry is certainly moving there. Fast forward 10 years, how we operate on the property management side will be different. But today, I would say there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of buzzwords, and there's just really not as much of a there is a benefit, but in order to get to the benefit of a lot of that, it requires a significant time and training investment that is not really feasible by any of the bigger players in the industry, us included. So that's how I would answer kind of technology and the challenge piece.
I would agree with you, Joey. And the taxes and insurance, spoken like a true someone on the asset management side.
Yeah,
Um,
painful. Yeah.
uh, but I would agree with that, that there are a lot of tools out there. And Dwight Capital is not a small company, but it's not nearly the size of Cushman and Wakefield, and it's still privately owned lender. But I would agree that a lot of these tools, the onboarding process and just it is intense. So it is deciding what is worth it, and what will be a good investment because um, recently switched our sort of deal management platform on our underwriting side, and it's serving us well, but it was a lot of investment in hours and thinking and onboarding. So I think that definitely is a consideration when looking at new tools, that in order for them to work really well for you, there is a big front end cost. Um,
Agreed.
Another question from the industry, a little more specific to business. When breaking into a new multifamily market, what are some do's and don'ts and some absolute skill sets that you require?
do they mean like geographically, you
Um,
think, or like?
I'm not sure. Could be geographically, or I guess it could be a new niche as well, if anybody wants to comment on either of those things.
From a geographic perspective, it's something we discuss a lot internally here at Bell. We're in 12 target markets across the country, and we're constantly evaluating, do we need to expand that list or not? And I spent a lot of time working through this at my last job in Cortera as well. And really for us, what governs whether a market is, something that we should add to our strategic market, should we be moving in, is twofold. One, can we get the scale and depth of market in order to really know the market and be a best-in-class operator there? So I don't think we would ever move into a market where we only hold one asset, right? You need to have depth and scale in order to really be a market leader and have the intel to stay fluid within a market. So we never want to be moving in and out of markets. We want to move to a market, commit. And so we need to have at least 2,000 units in a market from our perspective as an operator to feel like we really have the intel and the ability to differentiate ourselves in the market. So kind of depth of market space is important. And obviously, in order for that to make sense, you need to have some sort of floor on overall population size. Nashville, for example, is a market that we're considering adding to our target market. Second, I think it's really important, and tertiary markets over the last 3 years, post COVID became really hot in kind of the Sun Belt and Southeast. But are there institutional buyers there, right? When you look to exit, just because you see kind of an opportunity in something underwrites today, who are your buyers when you exit an asset? So really being intentional about what capital will go to spaces. So if you're moving outside of what are considered kind of core markets, who's your buyer? So making sure that you don't invest in a place where you won't have liquidity on the back end. So those are kind of two big ones for me.
I guess speaking from a lending perspective, Troy Capital does lend nationwide and doesn't target markets on the HUD financing side. It really, and we HUD has a very good new construction product to finance apartments, which is really where you have to take a look at market. Does adding new units make sense? And so it is interesting to hear Sarah's perspective on her sort of moving into markets. on my side, they're very, it's very case by case. And some parts of Austin may not want to build, lend on a new construction project. Another part might be fine. So it gets really into the minutia and different perspectives depending on what side of the real estate, finance world you're on.
I would just add again the tax and insurance issue. Make sure you have a good consultant, a very good consultant with a proven track record in the given market, probably for both. So talk to your broker, find a good tax representative in the given market. And then the regulatory environment is ever evolving. We haven't really touched on that, but um, you can get in a lot of trouble entering a new market if you're not familiar with, maybe there's a new affordable requirement, or the fee transparency has been a huge talking point lately, and that is going to be expanding. It's pretty clear. So if you're entering a new market, connect with legal representation to make sure you understand the regulatory landscape that may be different from other markets you were in, and then find a good tax consultant, I would say is important, so you understand what you're doing.
Okay, thank you. Let's, as we head toward the final minutes of our conversation today, let's take a broader look out. And I'd like to ask you what you think the next decade for multifamily real estate will look like. David, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. If I don't have a crystal ball, if I did, I would not be sharing this information, admittedly. But I think the question is how I think the marketplace is going to become more efficient. The question is how much more efficient, either through AI or other means. We're continuing to see consolidation of units amongst the largest players in the industry. And I think a lot of that data and information is proprietary to those, largest players. And so, commercial real estate has largely always been, and is still currently a very private market with, imperfect and disjointed information. And so it's really a race to see who's got the best information and, who can make the most prudent investment decisions. And so I think, prudent capital stacks and quality operations and strong asset management teams are always going to outperform over the next decade. So
Who wants to chime in next? Joey, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just very briefly. I mean, I would say that the reality is there is a national housing shortage that is not, and that's data from the National Realtors Associations, and I
Mhm.
think NAA has also published data along those lines. So the demand for housing, both on the single family side, but on the apartment side as well, is going to continue to increase. So the demand is there. So that is good. That means generally, from a rent growth and occupancy perspective, differs by sub-market and market and supply pipeline and that type of thing. But the demand is there, which bodes pretty well for our industry. The other part that I touched on a little bit was, I think the regulatory landscape is changing rapidly, and that impacts how we have to operate on the property management side. But as an owner, I think there are some considerations there that need to be consistently, evaluated, and maybe that changes your strategy and markets that you look at or don't. But I think paying attention to that is important.
Sarah?
Yeah, I echo what Joey just said. I think demand for housing will remain strong. And I think even if AI displaces a lot of jobs, that could hurt the urban core. See what that happens, what that looks like. But if anything, it should lead more people to renting versus buying if it really does disrupt the market. I think when we think across the real estate spectrum, housing will remain really high in demand and a safe bet from an investing perspective.
Okay, and Karen?
Yeah, I would echo what everyone else has said. I think there's still large demand for apartment um, units and rental housing, and that it continues to um, remain a strong industry, and there will be needs to finance it and build it and own it and continue. I think if anything, apartments they keep getting nicer, and I think people are interested in renting for longer terms and the freedom that comes along with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that was a good upbeat note to end on. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We'll be sending everybody a link when the recording is available. And if you enjoyed this webinar, please do join us for our mid-year outlook, which we're planning for early July. And if you'd like some insights on the commercial real estate outlook, CPE Voices will feature its own mid-year outlook on June 23rd. Meanwhile, thank you again to all of our speakers for today's very interesting discussion, and thank you to our audience as well for attending.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.